Shalom, Akiminakwa. This is your brother Azariah. I want to start by giving all the praise and the honor and the glory to Yahawashi, Yahawashi, Yahweh being the true name of the Most High God, and doing so in the name of His only begotten Son, who the world knows as Jesus Christ, but we know the true name to be Yahawashi, and He is the Hamashiach. All right. And what I want to do real quick on this, is touch upon. This will be titled basically along the lines of, hey, did Ruth serve other gods, right? And if she did serve other gods, who were those gods? That's what we're going to touch upon. Did she serve other gods, as in pagan, gods of wood and stone? That's what we're going to get into, because a lot of people tend to use this as, ammunition to discredit the fact that Ruth is an Israelite, and, to say that she was actually a Moabite, or an actual Moabite by blood. So we want to dig into that. And one of the first things, there's other ways, there's other things to get into when understanding that fully, because there's more that people use, and really more to break down to get into this understanding. But for this specific one, we're going to just dig into, hey, did Ruth serve other gods? We're going to get into the words, because it really goes into a meaning of words. And before we even get into this, because we're going to jump to it, but the first thing I do want to address is, and I'm going to address this every time, Yahweh willing, that I get into this topic, which is, when you go into the Bible, do you see outside of the book of Ruth, which people, from the perspective of saying, if we said Ruth was a heathen, right, a true heathen by blood, do we see any Bible, any book in the Bible where a heathen, they get a book named after them, right? So is there any heathen in there that has a book named after them? Any bloodline heathen? Do we have that? And I haven't seen it. So if the answer is no, then why would the Most High do that with Ruth? Why are we getting that? Right? Because we've had stories. We had like Rahab, who's brought up in the scriptures a couple times, more than just the time when she helped out Joshua and our rest when he was coming, the rest of our ancestors when they was coming from the wilderness. So it's more than just that. It's listed in the New Testament as well, of Rahab, right, who wasn't an Israelite, but she did a good deed, blessed towards our people, and she's acknowledged. She didn't get a whole book named after her though. And that was a very key moment, right? So, but Ruth does. And I'm going to keep nailing that. Ruth being, if she's a heathen, she gets a book named after, when every other book is written out of Israelites. But yet the heathen get a name and a placeholder in the Holy Bible. And see, this is why, there's brothers and sisters that believe Gentiles can, true natural Gentiles that are heathen, can be brought in. This is an example that people use, right? And this is why we're going to use the lead into this Galatians. What I'm going to do is Galatians 3:28, working on it right now, which it doesn't honestly take long, but people use this as ammo to give to credit what you would call Gentile salvation, right? People use that as ammunition for that. Oh, Ruth was a heathen, and look, and they have every right to say that when you make claims that Ruth is not an Israelite. So let's get into this real quick, right? Ruth chapter 1 and verse 1. We'll start here. It came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, the name of his 2 sons Mahlon, Chilion, and Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the woman of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. All right, now first piece that we're going to get on right here in verse 4. They took them wives of the woman of Moab, right? Let's get into that Moab. See, you got to get into these words, get into these Hebrew, right, translations, all right, of the woman of Moab.
Strong's H 4125. Moavi. Moavi. Gesenius Lexicon. Moav. Moav.
Moab, all right. Now let's look at this, the outline of biblical usage, right, dealing with the Hebrew. A Moabi, all right. Moab, from father, what father? So you could be someone, Moabite, someone that comes from the lineage of Moab, right? Or it could be a citizen of Moab. A citizen of Moab, your citizenship is of Moab. B, an inhabitant of the land of Moab. So someone who dwelt in the land of Moab could also be considered of Moab. You know what I'm saying? This is like a foreshadow. It could be called Moab because that's where they dwelt. It happens all the time based on our land of where we were. This is what they're called. See what I'm saying? Like, and the same logic is applied, right? For brothers and sisters that understand, the aspect of there's neither Jew nor Greek, right? If y'all understand who those Greeks are, you apply the same logic to this. It's not hard. It's the same. This was a foreshadow. If anything, this was your easy foreshadowing to that of the scattering and us being called of different, different countries or different areas that we resided in, different lands. It's the same. It's the same logic applied. So we see just by going into this, woman of Moab doesn't have to mean a straight Moabite by blood. It could also mean a citizen of Moab, or it could also mean an inhabitant of the land of Moab. Right, look at the definition going forward. A descendant from Moab, woman of Moab. See that? That could be a descendant, right? When you go into the descendant, this will tell you, right? See, he didn't give you it gave you a different definition. Moab, of his father, right? Son of Lot by his eldest daughter. Nation descended from the son of Lot. Here's another, the land inhabited by the descendants of the son of Lot. That's going more into the descendants aspect, but the one we're getting from here is clear about saying a citizen of Moab or an inhabitant of the land of Moab. So this definition, when it comes to dealing with woman of Moab, even though, right, you're getting into the other words of Moab, it's showing clear that there's a difference between this one and the other, right? So that's telling right there for that goes for Ruth and Orpha. All right. Now I'm gonna jump down. I'm gonna jump down to verse. Go to 12. Turn again, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have an husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have an husband also tonight, and should also bear sons, would ye tarry for them till they were grown? Would ye stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes, that the hand of Yahweh is gone out against me. And they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Orpha kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave unto her. And she said, Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. And Ruth, so right here, right, unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law, right? Keep it going. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God, my God. So then people use this again. They think this is ammunition, that Ruth is admitting that, like IUIC said this in a lesson. They said 15 minutes breaking down Ruth. Breaking down Ruth not being an Israelite. Hey, look, in here, right, they think that's an admitting that Ruth is saying that Her people are a different set of people, and her gods, her God will become their God. Excuse me, Naomi being an Israelite, right? Her gods will become her God. Now, if this is the truth, right? You gotta look at it from the standpoint. That means any of these heathen that say that, well, your God will become my God. And what do most of us do, man? You turn that down because you know what it is. You know that can't be so because the Most High has a chosen, right? And you could be subordinate. All nations will be subordinate under Israel. It's an order to the thing, right? That's understandable. Most brothers will be on the block and say, if a heathen says that, you'll turn them down quickly. You won't let a Ruth situation like that happen if Ruth was a heathen, right? So you apply this. This is how we understand it to apply the same logic, right? Let's take a look at verse 15, right? She said, behold, thy sister-in-law is going back onto her people and onto her gods. All right, let's go on to her people. It has nation, it has people, nation, persons. So these are options, right? Persons, members of one's people, compatriots, countrymen, or kinsmen, kindred. Now look at the Strong's definition. So you got to weigh all the options in the balance and put the pieces to the puzzle, right? From a people as a congregated unit, specifically a tribe, as of those of Israel. You see that? Right? And hopefully this is just to help, right? Brothers and sisters understand that. Hey, look, yeah, definitely Ruth. Ruth is an Israelite. See how this plays? Specifically a tribe. So that's what she was talking. Her sister was of a tribe, which they are of the same. Her sister of a tribe. Now, right, let's go on to her gods. And you know what? I should have got the word. Let me get the word out real quick.
Strong's H 5971. Am.
All right.
Second entry.
Now let's see what gods we're talking about right here.
Strong's H 430, entry 1. Eloach. So second entry. Elohim. Elohim.
So we're looking at Elohim.
And the third entry, Eloach.
So we're looking at Elohim or Elohim. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at Elohim, right? And what is that word for Elohim? Rulers, judges. And the book of Ruth starts with the judges, right? The book of Ruth starts with the judges. Supreme divine ones, angels, gods. Because remember, at the time, when we look at the beginning, we go back there, right? We're going to go back there. Just keep it key on here, right? There's all definitions. Angels, gods. We got to look at context. Rulers and judges makes sense. All this different exchanging of gods, right? They don't condone that. Israel can't even, someone like Naomi, other people, they can't even condone that. Go serve your pagan gods, right? Back to Ruth 1. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled. See that? This was around the time of judges. In fact, so extra proof right here, right? So I did this before. If you type in the timeline of Ruth and Judges, right? Here's an AI overview. The book of Ruth is set during the period of the Judges, right? After the Israelites entered the promised land for the time of King David, right? Judges ruled Israel for roughly 300 years, beginning after the death of Joshua. All right, you see that? Same thing. The story of Ruth takes place in the time of the Judges after the conquest of Canaan and before 1050 BC. See this? So this is what this is what they're talking about. The judges, the rulers at the time that were set over Israel. Let's go right here. Let's see what Ruth says. Saying that was dealing with her sister. Let's see if with her it's the same thing, right? Thy people, same, right? Nation, people, persons, members of one's people, compatriots, countrymen, kinsmen, kindred. Same definition. A people is a congregating unit, specifically a tribe as of those of Israel. Same situation. Let's get and thy God. We get my people too. Same thing. My people, same thing. Right? Now let's go to and thy God. Elohim, same definition. Rulers, judges. So when you're looking at that, it's not talking about thy God, my God. When she's saying that, they're not talking about different gods. Hey, now your God is going to be my God, right? When we apply that logic to other heathen, that can't be the case. Think about all the, the Gentile salvation, fighters, that try to make that case, and they'll use, certain things like what's the man's name? I'm forgetting it in the book of Acts. No, it wasn't Herod. And I'm dang, remembering, forgetting his name. Who had Paul on trial? King Agrippa, right? King Agrippa, right? Think about how many people try to fight for King Agrippa to, be, hey, he'd be in Israel when he said almost, made me thou a Christian, like he would actually be a believer. And it's the same type of scenario, right? We can't do it. We can't insert someone in there, right? Because that would be the same logic of doing that with Ruth. And that's why people use that. That's why people who fight for this doctrine, they use that. Because when you say that Ruth is a Gentile or by blood, a heathen, which she didn't even practice in the customs of the Gentile, so she's not even a Gentile by any, realm of the word. She didn't even practice the customs, heathen customs. Her situation was she was just an inhabitant of the land of Moab. So it's not even the same scenario. She just was an inhabitant of that land. A stranger to others, right? Other fellow kinsmen Israelites. That, hey, I digress. So when we're looking at that, we see that the Hebrew text shows that this God is, and thy God, my God is Elohim, right? That's just what it is. And she being called, look, we even jump down to 22. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, which is what people go into, her daughter-in-law with her, which returned out of the country of Moab, which is where she was, returned out of the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of barley harvest. Look, I'm gonna go into this Moabitess. Same thing we read before. Moabite, from the father. What father? Citizen of Moab, an inhabitant of the land of Moab, right? We have to apply these things. We have to apply that. It's all based on context. And when you add everything up, just from off this alone, the clues line up more so that Ruth was indeed an Israelite. It's no different, right, than when we apply in this sense, right? When we apply the book of Acts, let's go to book Acts chapter 16 and make a parallel, right? Let's draw a parallel here. The book of Acts chapter 16 and starting off from verse 1. Then came he to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple was there named Timotheus, which we know is Timothy, right? We know he's an Israelite. We know Timothy's an Israelite. Paul wouldn't write to a heathen, right? A bloodline true heathen. The son of a certain woman, which was a Jewess. She was a Jew and believed, but his father was a Greek. Now, does that mean that, because we know Timothy's an Israelite, right? Of the 12 tribes, we know he was an Israelite, but his father was a Greek. He couldn't be an Israelite if his father actually was of a different nation. So we understand that he was a Greek. I'm going to use the same scripture, probably going to be using the same scripture in the next lesson, the Jew nor Greek, but I digress. He was a Greek. He was an inhabitant, Hellenized. We get into that, right? the Greek Hellene, right? A Greek either by nationality, whether a native of the mainland or of the Greek islands or colonies. So you apply that the same way, use the same logic. So we just have the evidence by this alone that Ruth was not serving other gods in the sense of pagan gods of wood and stone. She indeed served the Most High God. It's just that the gods that she was speaking of were judges or rulers, right? So I hope this was edifying for brothers and sisters. Hope this makes its way so, brothers and sisters can understand Ruth was an Israelite, right? Ruth was an Israelite. All praises, honor, and glory to Yahawah, Ba'asham, Yahawashi. Till next time, Yahawah willing, Shalom.